Okay, you people. So listen, we start as usual with our aspect. We sort of put ourselves in the right direction. But the very first thing, of course, Mary, as SPC of the center, just to explain what she's going to do, it has great meaning, you know. She's going to, on behalf of Thupten Nobiling, and Thupten Nobiling has invited this teaching. So she's going to offer a mandala. And this really is, it's a representation of the universe. So if you see all those, you know, in Tantra especially, you see those round drawings, we know they're called mandalas. They're like they're an architectural drawing of Buddha's abode, and we're going to be discussing this in Tantra. But but our world, you know, there's the regular world we live in. So of course, if you study Buddhist cosmology, you'll know that Mount Meru was in the center of the universe, and that we've got a blue sky because it's reflecting off lapis lazuli. We didn't learn that at school, I don't think. But if we don't know Buddhist cosmological view of the universe or the contents, we simply, it's a very marvelous, we simply imagine, you know, they're very good at, this is exactly coming from the Tantric Approach, which we're going to talk about. It's kind of very creative. So we imagine all the marvelous things of the world that make everyone happy. We're going to offer, we're going to imagine, I can't see Buddha's face. You're going to imagine piling them all up as big as you can, think as big as possible, and pile them all up and offer to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. So we imagine Buddha's going to be giving the teachings. That's the most auspicious thing to do. So this little wee prayer we sing is just expressing this, you know, except it's, of course, it says it with Mount Meru in the middle and the four continents, the sun and the moon and things. So imagine all the marvelous things, and you offer as a request for the teachings. It's like when you visit a person, you don't go empty-handed, do you? So it's got great meaning. So, okay, Mary will lead it. Mary is the Umze.
Sajipu ki jushin metok tramri rablingji ni degen padi sange jingdu mi te huai nam dag jingla cho pasok.
I think it's the other song, Mary, as well, to sing the other prayer to request the teachings, to turn the wheel of Dharma, especially if it's important to sing that too, I'd say. If you've got that there. If not, don't worry. No?
No, we do not.
Okay, next time.
I apologize.
It's important to have that one as well. So then anyway, when we do this Sanskrit mantra, that was Tibetan that we sang. This is Sanskrit. And we say this mantra, we imagine Buddha happily receiving our offering. Idam
Guru Ratnam Mandalakam Niratayami.
Okay, that's fine. That's lovely. That's perfect. Good. Okay.
All right. Refuge, please, Mary.
Yes, I will. Okay, and I will lead that one. That's how it is. So this is, as usual, setting our motivation, as the Lamas would say, stating our purpose for being together, which is the second two lines. But the first two lines are expressing our reliance. You know, we rely upon, we'll sing it in English once. We rely upon, we go for refuge. It means we rely upon until I'm enlightened, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then now this is our motivation. And by the virtuous karma we create, by listening to the Dharma, by listening to these teachings, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soke chong nam la, jancho baru dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog. Sangye chodang soke chong nam la, jancho baru dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shog. All right. Thank you, Mary. Okay. So this is one of the modules of this 14 module course of, you know, Discovering Buddhism. It's been around now for quite a while, one of the empty courses. So, you know, if you've heard the teachings, if we know the teachings, we've heard about the lamrim, and you've heard me say things, you're going to hear the junior school, high school, university. Now this is postgraduate. And I think I keep saying it, it's kind of, the Lamas don't say it like this. It's words we use in English. But we get it immediately, and this is the crucial point I always talk about, that we understand in any body of knowledge, we understand that you go gradually. junior school, high school. We know that. We just so know it. It's so automatic. We would never think of just randomly going to fourth year at university in physics. You go to year 1. It's sort of logical, but we don't think that was spiritual. And I'm telling you, even though we've been studying, many of us have been trying to practice Dharma for many years, it's still, people find it really hard if they've known the lamrim and they've known the Dharma, they know the word Bodhichitta, they know the word karma, but they're never sure where it all fits. So because we can't hear this experiential implication, we can't hear how some teachings are more complex than others. And this is the thing that's absolutely vital. I mean, I always talk about when I first heard the teachings from Lama Zopa, this lamrim, I had no idea what he was talking about. Even when I became a nun and I was working for Wisdom and I was editing Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, this classic handbook that Lama Zopa Rinpoche always uses, one of his lamas from the early 20th century. Lama Zopa wasn't living there, but the lamas who lived at that time. That's his favorite book, presenting this lamrim. And if you're a student of Lama Zopa, that's one of his favorite words in all the teachings, the word lamrim. But even as I was editing the book, it still didn't make sense. It was very arcane, because it's not presented in the way we talk. Now, that's the skill of Lama Yeshe. So, Jonathan Landau, American author and teacher, whose course notes you've got in the PDF there, the course notes you've got, his teaching, this module is taught by John. The course notes are by him. He's also the author, or actually not, he compiled and edited the book of Lama Yeshe. It's called Introduction to Tantra. And it's renowned among all Tibetan Buddhists as one of the best introductions. So first of all, if you want to study this course with me, this 4 weeks, whatever it is, you need to read that book. I should have said all this earlier. I'm so sorry I didn't prepare you. Some of you might have it, but I highly recommend. I really recommend highly, because Lama had this amazing way, I talk about this all the time, unbelievably skillful way of presenting these concepts in a very down-to-earth way. He was quite radical and he was unusual, in that way. So Lama really, if you read Introduction to Tantra, and John is the one who compiled and edited, and John is one of his most devoted students, this Lama really presents psychologically how the approach. And that's the key thing to understand. All of Buddha's teachings, one way of presenting all of Buddha's teachings is without doubt, with certainty, it is psychology. That often surprises us, because we don't think religion is psychology. We think we're dealing with some mysterious thing called a soul. Well, Buddha doesn't even assert a thing called a soul. He talks about mind. So mind means psychology. It's Greek fancy word for dealing with the mind, So Tantra is the most sophisticated level of Buddhist psychology and philosophy. That's a fact. It's a very simple way of putting it. But sophisticated in the best meaning, not some arrogant, silly way, And that's why it's postgraduate. That's why it's the most advanced level of the teaching. So again, let's just remind ourselves, there's this lovely analogy. I use it continuously. A bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. Well, the wisdom wing is the first stages of the lamrim. Lama Zopa very respectfully calling it the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. I call it junior school, just because we get that, Then there's middle scope, the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability, high school. That's the wisdom wing. And if you graduate there, you're a Hinayana practitioner. You're a Theravadan practitioner. That's where you graduate. You achieve your own liberation from suffering. So you go on to the Mahayana component, the Bodhisattva path. That's got the sutra teachings, the sutra component, which is the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva, the achievement of Bodhichitta, and the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. And then there is Tantra, Vajrayana, the most advanced level. So the goal, if you're studying math and science, you're studying, the goal of studying 1 + 1 is 2. If you join a physics class, the goal of studying 1 + 1 is 2. The goal of learning all those other complicated things that you have to do leads you all the way to understanding all the kind of the complex concepts in physics. They all lead you to that. Might be not explicit in the beginning, but it leads you to that. So all the stages of Buddha's teachings, logically, if it's part of an entire course, they all lead you to Buddhahood. Buddhahood is the goal. Buddha, rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness, and those different levels. So if you graduate at junior school, what you will be practicing, essentially, the essence of junior school is you abide by the laws of karma and you stop the grossest level of suffering. You at least get another decent human rebirth, so you can keep on bopping, having nice things in a decent human rebirth. What caused that? Stopping killing, lying, stealing, blah, blah, blah. Living in vows and purifying your mind. You'll guarantee that if you graduate at high school, at junior school, you'll keep getting a nice human rebirth. But you want more than that. So you can go to high school and you can get rid of all suffering altogether by understanding the delusions and neuroses. So you can then liberate it from suffering. That's the Hinayana one. You can go further, you can become a Buddha. And there's then the Sutra approach, and then that leads you to the most advanced approach, which is Vajrayana, which is Tantra. So Lama talks about it in the most essential way. And I really want you to study that book. If you're going to do these 6 weeks, I don't know how long we can last. I don't know if I can talk for 6 weeks about Tantra. I'm not sure. Maybe it'll end up being only a month, Mary. I might disappoint you all. Okay, but if I talk slowly, it'll take 6 weeks. But I'm not old enough yet. I keep thinking when I get old, I'll talk slowly and calm down. But I haven't yet. So maybe I'm going to give up on that goal, okay? So we'll just see how far we go. We'll see how long we take this course, all right, people? Because I'm not that educated. I mean, Geshe Sherpa is far more educated than me. Gen Don is more educated than me. They can, teach nicely for 6 weeks on this one. So we'll see how we go, okay? I'll be quoting Lama. I mean, Lama, I'm Lama's daughter. So I'll be talking, Lama. I didn't try to talk like Lama because Lama's in me and he's my Lama. Somehow I'll talk like him. And Lama Zopa, he's my Lama too. I'm his daughter as well. So, okay. So it's the most advanced level. The goal of all of them, the goal is leading you to Buddhahood. It's leading you to this goal that Buddha has found, and this is in the Sutra teachings, or the mantra, or the Tantra, either way, that this is the key thing. It's about the mind. What becomes Buddha is the mind. What practices is the mind. Your body, your nose, your eyelashes don't. You've got them and they're a hassle, actually. They don't become a Buddha. They don't practice. You've got to harness them because they're berserk so the mind can do its job. That's the key point, So the key then thing to understand, if we're trying to become a Buddha and all the purpose of all the teachings, certainly the lamrim and all the stages of the path as presented by Tsongkhapa, our lineage Lama, our patron saint, our 14th century patron saint of our Gelugpa tradition, then if you're trying to become a Buddha, then clearly we need to know what Buddha means. So again, that word, I always quote that. Buddha implies the eradication of all the delusions, and Da implies the development to perfection of all the goodness. Pretty simple. But what is a Buddha? We need to know, what is a Buddha? Well, the actual word Buddha, this is, is referring to consciousness, to mind. Now remember, Buddha doesn't use the word soul. He doesn't use the word spirit. There's no equivalent in Buddhism. He uses the word mind, which covers whatever we think we mean by soul or spirit, to put it that way. Because Buddha's view of the mind, as we know enough from studying the lamrim, his view of the mind is it's got this far more subtle capacity for cognition. The job of mind is to cognize. Cognize what? How things exist. That's the job. That's the wisdom of a Buddha. And combine that with bodhicitta, you've got a Buddha. So the word Buddha refers to the mind, enlightened mind. Now, using Sanskrit, and this is from Tantra, this is from Tantra, you've got the actual Buddha, the actual omniscient mind. Now, mind for the Buddha isn't physical, remember? It's not physical. It's not the brain. We need a brain at the gross level, no problem. We need a decent body, mind and body work intimately together. But the Vajrayana model, and we'll discuss this, is the Vajrayana model of how we're constructed. And this is crucial to understand if you want to understand Tantra. Lama Yeshe says Tantra is highly technical. And that's in fact what it is. These highly technical, sophisticated methods that the greatest yogis can use to help them quickly become a Buddha. It's called the quick path. And that's for technical reasons. And that's why we have to understand the technology of the mind and the body according to Tantra. Now, we often talk about that. We've talked about death, when you discuss the death process. You look at Lama Zopa's book, How to Face Death Without Fear, and the death process is described, that's straight from Vajrayana. So because it's so much a complete part of the whole Tibetan Buddhist approach to life, all the teachings in Buddhism in Tibet end up with Tantra. Vajrayana is kind of the broader model, and all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions all end up with Tantra. And I think in terms of the world, okay, jumping a bit here. In terms of the world where Buddhism exists, in Burma and Thailand and other countries, you're going to find the Theravadan Buddhism. Theravadan, in fact, is one of the remaining 18 sub-schools of the Hinayana. And there are two views in there, the Vipashika and the Satantrika. And you learn this in Buddhist tenets. There's many viewpoints in Buddhism over the centuries about reality, about existence. So the Theravadan teachings, that's the only remaining of the 18 sub-schools of one of those schools of thought. I forget which one it is in the Hinayana. And that you'll learn you'll learn that in Thailand and Burma. Now, if you go to Japan and China and Taiwan, you're going to hear about the Bodhisattva path as well. If you go to Tibet, you also get all of those and the Vajrayana. So Vajrayana is still only extant in Tibet. It probably didn't go to other countries. I'm not that, well, no, it was in Indonesia. As we know, Atisha, one of the amazing great scholars and poets and saints who spent the last 15, 18 years of his life in Tibet, so he's big in Tibet, all his teachings. He spent years and years with his guru Selingpa, a great Vajrayana yogi, who was in Sumatra, which is Indonesia. And if people go there and see that big fat thing, that big place, that Borobudur, it's a great big mandala, you know, it's a tantric thing. Vajrayana was existing there, probably other parts of the world as well. I'm not very knowledgeable. So in Tibet, that's where it really still and continues to exist. And any of the lamas, they all go all the way to Vajrayana, you know. So Vajrayana is going to be kind of, you're going to hear it all the way through. So even as a Tibetan Buddhist, when you first go to your first course, you might do a practice of Tara, you know. Tara's Vajrayana. Tara's Vajrayana, Chenrezig is Vajrayana, but it's so integrated into the path, and much of it comes down to the ground level, because many of those practices you can do without empowerment. It's so completely a part of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. If you go to any Tibetan Buddhist monastery, you go to Kopan Monastery, it's dripping in all these Vajrayana, the nature of them is Vajrayana. If you go to Japan, you won't see, you'll see a statue of the Buddha like that. If you go to Thailand, you'll see statues of the Buddha like that. So Tibet, Vajrayana is completely integrated into the entire approach and has been since Dharma first went there, brought by Padmasambhava, this great tantric yogi, you know, in the 8th century. So, okay, so the word Buddha is referring to consciousness. Consciousness for Buddha, mind for Buddha, they're synonymous, are not physical by definition. So when that mind is fully developed, and if you think about it, if you can try and posit something that's not physical, the mind, that's what we think about a soul, don't we? It's not physical, but Buddha doesn't use that. Mind is not physical. All aspects of our mind, the deluded parts, the neurotic parts, the psychopathic parts, the virtuous parts, all the bits and pieces, all the sensory, all of that is mind. And when it's fully developed, a Buddha's mind, then think about it. It has to pervade the universe. I know that the lamas often say that it's like God. God is everywhere. I know when I was a Catholic, a little girl, I loved the idea of God being everywhere. God is I'd always think God's in the light switch. I don't know why the light switch, I'd look at it. God is in the margin of my homework, I'd think, but I couldn't get it. How come God is everywhere, you know? Anyway, so it's like that. Dharma. So the word in Sanskrit is Dharma Kaya. It technically means truth body. It's a bit abstract sounding. It's referring to the enlightened mind. Omniscient mind that's full of compassion and full of power. There are 3 essential qualities an enlightened mind has. That consciousness, and that's the potential everyone has got, that's the unique characteristic of the Mahayana view, is that every sentient being in the universe, every mind possessor possesses this potential to become enlightened. Enlightenment in Buddhism has got different levels. You can talk about, well, nirvana has 2. You've got the smaller nirvana, which is the nirvana of your own liberation. Then you have the nirvana of Buddhahood, the cessation of suffering and its causes of Buddhahood. So enlightenment also can refer to small and big. And so the actual full enlightenment, as Lama Zopa calls it, that's Buddha. So that mind, when it's fully developed, is called the Dharmakaya, and it pervades the universe. How can it not? It is, as long as if we can try and think in just dualistic terms, we think of places and things and places and space and time, you know? I mean, all this is really beyond that, but don't get too cosmic about it. The word Buddha, enlightened mind, pervades wherever there is existence. So if this is true, the concept of that, Buddha is everywhere. That means Buddha is right here. Buddha's right here. Indeed, in the light switch. Don't worry about it, you know. But Buddha is wherever there is existence. So every mind has that potential. Now the Buddha, that's great. That's great for the Buddha. Over countless lifetimes, a person has removed all the delusions by going through the Sutra approach, the Tantric approach, the Sutra approach, the junior school, high school, university, postgraduate. Finally, at some point or other, their mind has become fully enlightened. Finally, at some point or other, even the subtlest imprints of all delusions have been utterly removed and then now achieved the Dharmakaya. Now that's fine for them. But what about poor peanuts like us? Because what motivated that person to become a Buddha was compassion, unbearable compassion, as the way Rinpoche talks about it. Compassion, the likes of which we can't even conceptualize. The best we can do is look at His Holiness, look at people like Lama Zopa, look at our gurus, but it's really hard for us to imagine the level. So when you read all the teachings, you read the Bodhisattva literature, then you actually read the words of the outrageous capacity, the levels of compassion and indeed wisdom of the Bodhisattvas, finally of a Buddha. It's hard to even conceptualize. But this is not just talking metaphorically. This is actual. This is real, you know. So this mind manifests in bodies to benefit poor old peanuts like you and me. And that's called the Rupakaya, the form body. And you've got two of those. So speaking simply, this one here, we see behind the depiction of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, you know, who lived in India, the human being. That's known as the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. And then you've got in Tantra, and then this is really mainly it's described, it's really fully developed, these concepts in Vajrayana, you know. So then you've got the main Buddha in Tantra. All the Buddhas in Tantra, all the Buddhas in the Bodhisattva path, which is, and it's implicit that it's Tantra, that's called the Bodhisattva aspect, but actually it's the Tantrayana aspect, the Vajrayana aspect, which is all these gorgeous looking different people, like all them, there's millions of them. There's all these kinds of deities they call, but it's just another word for Buddha. The word deity is just equivalent to the word Buddha when you talk in Vajrayana. So the Buddha, the main tantric aspect of the Buddha, like Shakyamuni in the Vajrayana form, is and there's different in different traditions, but for us Gelugpas, we call him Vajradhara. I always say this when I was in Kopan and I was typing all the prayers, because I walked, you know, I've got some connection with words and my job of editing and printing and things. I walked straight into the publishing room and was typing all the prayers and doing the Ronios and the Gestetnas, this old-fashioned way we used to do of printing things, you know, before you had photocopiers. And every time I keep coming up with this name, Vajradhara, Dorji Chung. I liked him so much, and I discovered he was the same person. I was so happy. And I asked Lama Yeshe, who's Vajradhara, Lama? And he said, he's the biggest Buddha, dear. This is Lama's inimitable way of making something simple. So of course I was so proud. I love the biggest Buddha, but it's the tantric aspect of Shakyamuni Buddha, the tantric aspect of Buddha. Okay. But in the world of Buddhism, since the time of 2,500 years, that's Shakyamuni, that's the emanation body, the Namakana, and then the Namanakaya, and then the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, it's called. This is the Bodhisattva aspect in the aspect of the Vajrayana. So if all these drawings, these statues, they're actual visual representations of the different stages of the path. So if we understand junior school and high school, we'll get to that in a second, okay? They're manifestations of what we are trying to accomplish. So this is the Sutrayana, and the Sutrayana manifestation of Buddha. What we're trying to accomplish is subdued body, speech, and mind. And then you've got the Vajrayana manifestation of Buddha, the Vajrayana. That's the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, okay? So, okay, there's that, Buddha. So Buddha has three essential qualities: infinite wisdom, and that's depicted by Manjushri, one of those three Buddhas, by Manjushri, Manju, gentle voice. There's infinite compassion, which is represented by one example is Chenrezig, Avalokitesvara in Sanskrit, compassionate-eyed one, Lama Zopa translates. And then there's power. So there's the compassion to want to benefit others, the wisdom to know how, and the ability to do so. And that's often depicted by a wrathful blue Buddha called Vajrapani, but also often Tara, action energy. So you've got, and you know, compassion, the wish to benefit, the wisdom to know how, and the ability to do so. Okay, that's the goal. And all the stages of the path lead you to that. In fact, in the Vajrayana, which is taught in Tibet, they say you can't, you read Lama Yeshe's book and you'll hear this, you can't actually get enlightened until you've practiced Tantra. And this is where it becomes technical. And we'll describe this as we go along. Okay. Okay, so now, what becomes Buddha is your mind. So if that is our potential, we've got to ask the question, what is stopping us this millisecond from being a Buddha at this moment? What is, if it's the mind that becomes the Buddha, what is it in our mind at this moment that stops us from becoming a Buddha? It's the presence in our mind of delusions. Now, we learn all about this in high school. This is the sutra teachings. And this is the Hinayana teachings. We learn the Buddhist model of the mind. And this is absolutely vital. And again, it's just like if you go to postgraduate physics, you can't leap to postgraduate physics until you've done junior school, high school, and university. This is utterly logical. It's exactly the same here. So it is impossible to understand Tantra if you don't understand the mind. That means you've got to go to high school. And it's impossible to understand the mind properly until you've been to junior school, which is where you understand the law of karma. So, of course, all of these, and that's what's presented so beautifully in the lamrim, which I say really does take time. It's taken me years to really comprehend this gradual approach to it, this level of difficulty. It takes us a while because we're not used to thinking spiritual teachings or philosophy like this, you know. We give equal status to all the Buddhist teachings. Oh, there's a bit of karma, there's a bit of bodhicitta, there's a bit of tantra. We kind of vaguely know tantra is a bit sort of fancy, but we're not quite sure how. But if this is a coherent path, and the Buddha, if this is all coherent, if this is a valid path, if this is a valid, doable path to accomplish Buddhahood, then it needs to be coherent intellectually. And I like to say that all the time. It's so important because we love to mystify. Especially we love to mystify religion. I mean, Vajrayana. I mean, the nonsense, the garbage that's written is unbelievable because we love to mystify. The nonsense people talk about, especially about Tantra in the West, it's beyond horrible. So not to mystify it. That's the point. So, okay, if the mind gets enlightened, if the mind is the thing that is rid of all the delusions and full of all the goodness, then we understand that what's preventing us from the second of being a Buddha this moment is the presence in our mind of delusions, very simply, in the presence in our mind of delusions. So, okay, so we all know, we've studied a little bit of the lamrim, and we've studied, sorry, excuse me. And if we've studied, the lamrim, and we've learned, first of all, we learn the very first level of practice, then we learn the second level of practice, which is high school, and we learn about the mind. We become our own therapist. And Buddha's view of the mind is so specific, so precise, so detailed, and so different. So we can't imagine. And so if we understand then all these delusions, I mean, we all talk about, Buddha talks about, they talk about in the text, there's this map of the mind, basically, of 84,000 distinct, neurotic, ridiculous, misconceptions, states of mind. And Buddha, luckily for us, they all subsume down to these three. He talks about the three poisons. As Ling Rinpoche points out, 21,000 are rooted in the root delusion called ignorance. 21,000 are rooted in attachment, and 21,000 are rooted in anger, and the fourth 21,000 are rooted in all three. It's a really sophisticated, coherent map, So these three are massive. Like we talk, in our world in psychology, you read all the psychiatric volumes, new psychiatric illnesses every day. We're trying to find the meaning of the mind and understand the mind and why we suffer. Well, Buddha's been doing this and hasn't changed his tune in 2,500 years. It's the same model of the mind. Even the Hindus came up with this before the Buddha. So the thing is, to understand Tantra, we have to understand the key function. We have to understand delusions, because one of the key things you hear about in Tantra is this most sophisticated method where we can utilize the poison. They use the analogy of an alchemist. They can utilize the poison. So it's obvious if poison is there and a person can utilize it, the very first thing is poison by definition will kill you. But a person who's really sophisticated in their knowledge, if they can utilize it, that's pretty incredible. That's pretty amazing. Well, that's the way they talk about in Tantra. And that's why from day one, Lama Yeshe taught Tantra to Westerners. Because the key thing that he found, the key thing that he felt from meeting Westerners, was that this whole concept, which is in Vajrayana, that everything can be transformed. There's nothing in the mind, as far as Tantra is concerned, being the most sophisticated, alchemy is a perfect analogy, that everything in the mind, all the garbage in the mind, all the delusions can be transformed, can be utilized. So that's why the alchemy one is a great one. So what is the poison here that we're describing? Well, the poison is the delusions, but specifically attachment. This is the key delusion, the key state of mind that the greatest yogis in Tantra technically are able to utilize in order to quickly remove the delusions from the mind, in order to quickly become a Buddha. As Lama Yeshe says, it's highly technical. So if we don't understand precisely, and I mean precisely what attachment is, then it is a load of nonsense to think that you can understand Tantra. And the trouble is we don't, because we don't study all this stuff enough. Most of us don't study low rig. Most of us don't study, and we need to if we want to understand these teachings properly, you know. So to know technically exactly and precisely what attachment is and what it's not. And one of the biggest points here is if we hear in Tantra that a yogi can utilize attachment, when we understand that attachment's job is to trigger bliss. So, you know, when we learn in high school about attachment, we learn when we learn about the mind in the middle scope, we learn there are three main categories of states of mind: the deluded, neurotic, ridiculous ones, the virtues, and then the mechanics. I call them mechanics. And one of those is concentration. One is good. One is many of these: concentration, mindfulness, many of these, attention, intention, many of these. And one is called feeling. We'd have to have an entire class on this just to begin to understand this. We've discussed it briefly before. One is called feeling, not in the way we think of emotion, but either in the way we're constructed, the way we are constructed as beings. We either have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neutral feelings. So pleasant feeling is another word for bliss, joy, rapture, ecstasy, happiness. These are all levels of pleasant feelings. I mean, who's had rapture? Not me yet. Who's had ecstasy? Not me. Pleasant feelings, maybe a few, you know. Chocolate cake triggers a few pleasant feelings. You know, when you're feeling not too bad, you might have a pleasant feeling. That's called happiness, people. Well, the key point about attachment is that it triggers pleasant feelings. Now, in our world, without knowing Buddhist psychology, we conflate these words. We equate them. We don't even know there's a difference. And this is the major stumbling block in understanding Buddhist psychology, understanding Buddhist practice, and absolutely in understanding in Vajrayana. So as Lama would often joke, Lama would say, not joke, the more pleasure, the better, dear. And I mean, he means it sincerely. And he could see from the very beginning when he taught Westerners, taught all the hippies, you know, I met him a few years later after he first met the first people, that all this self-pity we have, this misery and depressed and anxious and worried and loathing ourselves. And all he did was try to lift us up and get us to be a little bit happy, you know. All he did was try to lift us up and get us to be a little bit happy. Because as soon as we hear the Buddhist teachings about you've got to give up attachment, as Lama Zopa says, you know, we as soon as we hear Buddha say, sorry, to be happy, to get happy, you've got to give up attachment. But that's a contradiction for us because we think they're the same. So we'll go, and as Lama Zopa says, oh, you mean I've got to give up my happiness? I've got to give up my heart? So we have this really wrong view about what attachment is and how and its relationship to happiness. Now, this is quite technical. And if you don't study it, then how do you understand even being a Buddhist? You can't. Therefore, it's not possible to understand the Tantrayana, not possible to understand Vajrayana, which is why there are these grotesque views about Tantra in the Western world. I mean, that's grotesque, like, you know, grotesque, bizarre. So it's really technical. And that's why studying the Buddhist teachings is so crucial. I mean, they do it for 20, 30 years in the monasteries where they study sutra. Then they go and study the tantric text for years as well, you know. It's a highly sophisticated presentation of the universe, of human technology, of the mind. All of Buddhist teachings is. And the most sophisticated is the Vajrayana. So, okay, the Vajrayana is the quickest way to get enlightened. It's the techniques are most sophisticated. Now, putting that in a really simple way, it's this. And then we'll do that later. Never mind that. Okay, so normally presenting, if I did in a traditional way, I'd be presenting right now in this teaching, and we'll do it now in my simple way. The prerequisites, as they say in the Gelugpa tradition, for example, Tsongkhapa, in order to enter into Tantra, that's how they put it, in order to enter into Tantra, meaning to even begin to get an empowerment, even the lowest level, there's various levels of Tantra. We're not going to possibly go into all those. I haven't got all that knowledge, but there are different levels of Tantra. So to go into even have an empowerment, into something like Tara, Chenrezig, that you can, practices that you can do without an empowerment, but to even receive them properly, there are various prerequisites. The prerequisites are first, you've got to have done junior school and high school. And from this, you get renunciation, or you begin to emerge, as John Landau says, as Lama says. Renunciation means literally you have a clear understanding of suffering and its causes. You'll understand the Four Noble Truths, you'll understand karma, you'll understand delusions. You've studied junior school and high school. You've got a real clear understanding of Buddha's mechanics of how we suffer, of the mechanics of samsara. You've got a really clear understanding of this, and you are sick of suffering. You're up to here with suffering. That's renunciation. And if you've got it properly, as Lama Zopa says, if you've got renunciation, honey, he doesn't say that. Lama Yeshe would say, dear. If you've got renunciation, as Lama Zopa puts it, just the thought of another moment of attachment, just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive. It's like being in a septic tank. Or other time he might say, it's like using used toilet paper. So that way to go, okay? Our default, until you're highly realized, and don't be miserable about this, until we're highly realized, our default view in the mind is attachment. So that's why we have to understand it much more deeply than, oh, I'm so attached to chocolate cake, you know. It's primordially deep in our mind. But with all the teachings, it's presented very organically and nicely and in a nice way, and we learn about it at the grossest level first. So we've got renunciation. The first prerequisite for entering into Tantra is to have some semblance of appreciation for, understanding of suffering and its causes, the first and second of the Four Noble Truths. And you get that from first entering into the lower scope, where you learn about the laws of karma, which is the view of the Buddhas that runs the universe, that it describes exactly why things happen, why happiness and why suffering. You understand that, and you abide by those laws, and you live in vows, and you purify every day. That's junior school practice. Then you've gone to high school, you've got some understanding of the mind, you've studied the mind a little bit, you've got a little bit of meditation under your belt, and you can become your own therapist, where you learn the key job of being a Buddhist. The key job of being a Buddhist is to know your mind precisely. And this is such a sophisticated job. The best we can do is first theoretically learn the difference between the delusions and the virtues. And then we use the mechanics of our mind, like concentration, intention, attention, etc., to help us navigate the seeming chaos in this mind of ours and to begin the actual job of being a Buddhist. Karma just prepares you. That's good ethics. Now, with good ethics, having controlled the servants of our body and speech, we can now really begin to unpack and unravel the mind on the basis of Buddhist psychology and understand the distinction between the delusions and the virtues. And this is very shocking, because this is not the Western model. This is not the materialist model, you know. We give them all equal status, and they're normal parts of a normal person. Buddhism is radically different. His view is radically different. So the key is we have to understand what a delusion is. And we've talked about that often enough, you know. So these, and then distinguishing between those and virtues. And so getting some semblance of understanding of these levels of practice, that brings some semblance of renunciation. This is your first prerequisite. You have to know what suffering is and know its causes. That implies you know the delusions, and that implies more specifically you know the three main delusions. In particular, you know the delusion called attachment and aversion. And aversion is a response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So that in order to understand Vajrayana, the key thing is to understand attachment. Because if you're going to be using attachment and transforming it, you've got to know, how can you possibly be a brilliant alchemist and use poison if you can't even identify poison? This is an absurd idea. You have to know what attachment is. First theoretically, and then gradually identifying in your mind. So then, that's the first prerequisite. The next prerequisite before entering into Tantra is again a reasonable appreciation for, an understanding of Bodhichitta, which is the next stage of your practice. The next stage, you go to university level, you go to the great scope, you go to the Bodhisattva wing, you go to the compassion wing, and now you practice all those techniques, starting with equanimity, and they culminate in Bodhichitta. An outrageous, insane paradigm shift in your mind, where now others are more important than you. Not just every now and again a flash in the pan, but constant, a profound realization. And you start, like I said before, you start to think about and read, and when you hear Lama Zopa talk, the qualities of a bodhisattva. You can't imagine it, you know. So from the first second of having accomplished bodhicitta, a stable realization of it, one criterion is that you no longer have the thought of I. The I functions in two ways. There's the I that arises, the instinctive fear-based sense of a concrete self-existent me. That's conquered by emptiness. But the consequence of that is this self-cherishing, putting me first, this primordial feeling of I being the central player in our head, which everything else is, and we see the entire universe, don't we, in terms of what benefits that I. That's just normal human life. Join the universe here. Well, that's no longer there. It's hard to imagine. You haven't realized emptiness yet, maybe. You might have, depends. But there's only the thought of others and this unbelievable qualities that a bodhisattva has. That's the second prerequisite. You don't wait till you've got that, but you at least have an appreciation of that and an aspiration to achieve it. Bodhichitta. The third prerequisite, which is what you get when you now move into the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva, the final stages of the sutra path to enlightenment, and you now perfect that bodhicitta and perfect that wisdom by practicing the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. And the last of the 6 is the realization of emptiness. That's the third prerequisite. So at the very least, the prerequisite before entering into Tantra is to have an appreciation of and an understanding of, to some degree, of emptiness. These are the 3. If you've got these 3, you are ready to enter into Tantra. Now, I mean, the thing is, it's degenerate times, you know, and the irony of degenerate times is that good things are easily available, but they're kind of devalued. It's a bit like I always remember when I was a kid reading about, you know, how a Deutschmark, to go buy a loaf of bread after the war in Germany, you needed a wheelbarrow of Deutschmarks. So that means there's masses of Deutschmarks, but it's such degenerate times that they're valueless. Well, that's the irony of now. I mean, you know, for Tibetans, to get a tantric empowerment, you know, you might have to walk for days, if not weeks, to get to where the Lama is, you know. But now these Lamas come to us and they speak our language, and now times are so degenerate. His Holiness is now giving empowerments on Zoom. So it's fortunate because we can sit in our bed with our popcorn thinking that's how degenerate we are, taking our empowerment from His Holiness and be bored and turn it off and go to sleep and put it on the next day like Netflix. I mean, it's unbelievable, the degenerate times, but how incredible that we are living in these times, you know. And this is interesting. All the Lamas say, and Lama Yeshe would say this, that this is why he would teach us Tantra from day one. Tantra is the most sophisticated teaching, but the times now are so degenerate, which means degenerate times is a time when attachment is rampant. And that's exactly now. This time is exactly a time of attachment. Our attachment is so rampant, so sophisticated, so demented. And many of the practices in Vajrayana, especially, for example, Vajrayogini and Haruka Chakra Sambhara, the practices of our lamas, these are perfect for degenerate times because they're the manifestation of purified attachment. So it's kind of ironic that these things are so available, but we don't even appreciate anymore, you know. But if we can appreciate, it's incredible. So Tantra is flourishing. Tantra, now is the time when Tantra can flourish. This is what they say about degenerate times. Because attachment is what is transformed, and attachment is now rampant. And as Lama Yeshe could see from day one with all of us in the West, we are all super sophisticated intellectually, and you need a good, bright mind to understand this stuff. You can't be an idiot. You need to understand the concept of transformation, which implies an understanding of emptiness. And we need to be very familiar with attachment, very familiar, and not, you know, so that we can then learn how to use it. And that's why he taught it for us from day one, you know. So skillful, so kind of Lama, so kind of extreme, so radical, actually. So, okay. So the 3 prerequisites is the lamrim, basically, you know, study the lamrim, first stage is second, and then you're ready to, because you got your background, just like you've got your high school, junior school, high school, and university. Then you can go study, you know, postgraduate physics. The same thing, exactly the same, not complicated. Okay. So Buddha, different forms of Buddha, like I said. And we're trying to become a Buddha. The bottom line for all of this is to end up becoming a Buddha. So they talk about how, so what has to be, so they talk about when you're going to read in the teachings, we have to accumulate the 2 accumulations. You've got to accumulate wisdom and you accumulate the method side, which is compassion. So it's a bit like Tantra is sort of a method, you know, it's sort of, the sutra practices, they say, are like collecting dollars one at a time. But the tantric method is like you can collect billions of dollars at a time. Let's say you need $10 billion to get a house. Well, you've got to collect $1 at a time and take you a long time. That's the sutra approach. But the tantric approach, you can collect very quickly these 2 accumulations. But again, remember, you can't just leap into Tantra. Oh, it's quick. I think I'll have that one. No, you've got to be a qualified person. Only a qualified person is capable of utilizing Tantra. So so now it's a more sophisticated level. It's at the end. It's the end stages of all of the practice. It's in the Mahayana. It's a method for becoming a Buddha. As Lama says, it's highly technical. And the key point about it is that everything, all the delusions, all the junk, is able to be transformed and utilized by the great tantric yogis. And that's why the prerequisites have to be renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. It's not possible to utilize poison if you don't understand poison and if you haven't conquered and harnessed poison. So what's the poison we're trying to use here? It's called attachment. That's the bottom line. All the delusions can be used. All the delusions can be used, but attachment's the key. So let's look at the entire path in the framework of what you do with attachment. Well, given that we're driven by it, we're these maniacs driven by this emotional hunger in us, this junky mind, frantic, demented, desperate, feeling nothing and nobody, so hungry like a vampire for something out there, such that when we get it, it'll trigger a bit of happiness. That's our method for getting happiness. So at the very first level of practice, given that we're driven by this attachment and we're out of control, our body and speech are out of control, the servants of attachment are completely berserk, and we're trying to harness it, which in the end, we're trying to use it, okay? The most sophisticated level is to utilize attachment. So the method, taken from the Vajrayana perspective, then the method is to harness attachment. So the very first level is you've got to harness the servants of attachment. You've got to control the body and speech. So use a simple example of chocolate cake. At the very first level of practice, the chocolate cake stays on the plate. You can't even have a piece of chocolate cake without the mind going berserk, as Lama puts it. So the first level of practice is you leave the cake on the plate, please, and you practice renunciation. You don't follow demented attachment because it's out of control, it's berserk, and the hand will just go like a vampire and shove it in the mouth, So you leave the cake on the plate. You harness the servants of attachment. You leave the cake there. You practice renunciation. You give up the cake, basically, because your attachment's too berserk. So as you harness the energy of your body and speech, you're also implicitly harnessing the mind, aren't you? Every time you don't follow attachment, your attachment begins to settle down. Well, I mean, it seems to get worse first. Of course it does. But eventually, every time you don't put oil on the fire will eventually calm down. So every time you don't touch the cake, you're harnessing. The explicit is leaving the cake, is controlling the hand and the mouth, but implicit is you're gradually helping the attachment calm. Now you can get to high school where you've got some semblance of discipline over your body and speech. How would your attachment, what would you do? What's your relationship with the cake here? Well, you could argue if you're really an advanced practitioner with genuine renunciation, which means a really precise and detailed understanding of the distinction between delusions and virtues, in particular attachment, and I mean really sophisticated level of practice, an amazing being getting close to getting liberation. You'd really know the difference between these states of mind. You've got some level of concentration. Your mind is in a state of joy because you're so clear, you're so steady, and you know exactly what attachment is, and you're no longer in the thrall of attachment. You could argue you could now have a piece of cake without going too berserk. You could argue that. You don't want the cake. You don't need the cake now. You're no longer dependent on the cake. You've got renunciation. You've got bliss from getting concentration or whatever, and you've given up attachment. This is the whole point. The only person who can eat the cake is the person who's given up attachment. So by this point, you've given up a pretty much attachment. You could have the cake without being too berserk. You could say that. Now you get to compassion wing. And now your compassion, this insane level of compassion and empathy and kindness and love, this completely overrides your attachment. Attachment is like nothing. It's in the background now. You would happily eat a cake if it were beneficial for another person. It wouldn't disturb your mind at all. It would not disturb you. You've so controlled your attachment. It means you've understood it. You've conquered that poison. You know exactly the characteristics of that poison, and you understand it. It cannot make you crazy now, because you know your mind so well, and you have such compassion that you'll do, but if at the whole level of Bodhisattva path, the whole level of practice in junior school and high school, which is where the first prerequisite to get renunciation, the level of practice there, and Buddha represents that, the level of practice there is to give up is to you do everything in your power to protect you from being berserk, to protect you from harming others, because that's what makes you berserk. So everything is to control your body and speech, and eventually in high school your mind. So you've harnessed this energy completely. You're a radiant, joyful person.
Hey, can you hear me now?
No longer.
Okay, good.
Can you turn off, good. Catherine? Can you turn off your thing, Catherine? Can you mute yourself, honey?
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, dearest. Thank you very much. Very kind. So you've really got it under control now. You'd be an astonishing person. And that's the thing about renunciation. When we think you're renouncing something, you kind of feel like you're all twisted and miserable. Oh, I'm so renounced. No, it's the opposite. A renounced person is joyful because they've understood attachment. They're no longer in its thrall. They've controlled their body and speech, and they be a joyful, marvelous human being.
Not yet.
Catherine, honey, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Can you mute yourself, Catherine? Thanks, baby. So you'd be an incredible person. So, by that point, you'd be amazing. You'd understand things, not just kind of tight. You'd be blissful and joyful and light, and you're no longer fooled by attachment. Now, as I said, you get to compassion wing, and you've got this unbelievable compassion. Oh, no, sorry. The main point of all the vows there is to protect you from harming yourself. Now, the point of the vows in the Bodhisattva path completely different. The whole point of the Bodhisattva path is so first of all, in the junior school and high school, it's the morality of restraint, the morality of refraining, of controlling, of discipline, incredibly sophisticated level of practice. Catherine, let's stay here, that's better. So then in Bodhisattva path, completely different. Now the vows, all vows, by the way, all vows are about behavior, not about the mind. Don't this, don't that, don't this. And in reference to not harming others in the beginning. In the Bodhisattva path, the whole emphasis is on how to refrain from this and refrain from this and refrain from that, so that you can learn to benefit others. The first one is so you can stop harming. The next level is so you can benefit. That's the point. So the vows are outrageous there, and the vows are indication of the level of advanced practice of a bodhisattva. So even, for example, in the bodhisattva vows, where a person so controlled their body, speech, and mind, so full of such compassion, that they can happily break an earlier vow solely for the benefit of another. So it implies a much more advanced person. And that's the bodhisattva vows. And even at that, so the first level, you leave the cake on the plate. Your attachment's out of control. You're completely berserk. So you control your body and speech. That begins to calm your attachment down. You get to high school, now you really start to unpack and unravel the mind, and you can really start to penetrate into the actual meaning of attachment, and your mind is so advanced now because you've got good concentration, you can see it exactly, and you're no longer in the thrall of it. This is such an advanced level. Most of us are nowhere near that. Then you get to the Bodhisattva path and you continue all this practice. You don't stop, but you now add compassion and the virtues to the mix, and you become much more brave, much more powerful practitioner. Unbelievable. Even Bodhisattvas are so advanced, and they already, you could argue, they're already able to utilize attachment without the mind going berserk. It's a very gradual process, I mean, Lama Zopa says this, for example, when we understand attachment, it's multifaceted. We can understand that, one of the functions of attachment is the grossest function, like at the animal level, is to be addicted to the object and crave to get the object into the senses. Another function of attachment is a very busy conceptual mind, never stopping thinking about things, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, anticipating things. So that's a function you can utilize. Being attached, when like, for example, you can you can be attached. We're all got attachment till we're hardly realized. So if we're on the Bodhisattva path, then we can utilize attachment even there, because you add compassion to the mix. So you're attached to food, but before you eat the food, you think of offering it to others. So that bodhicitta transforms that attachment. So at different stages, the attachment gets weaker, but you can add more components into it to make it more marvelous. You can use it. And by the time you get to Tantra, you would consciously eat the cake to trigger, which is based on attachment. The cake looks delicious, and it triggers the joy that's triggered. The essence of Tantra is to utilize the joy that is triggered by contact with attachment objects. But the only person who can do that has got renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. So it's a technical thing. So again, I want to say it. Attachment is a deluded state of mind. All the others, they're completely the voices of ego. They drive us completely now. They make us berserk and they cause us to harm others. And we have no control over our body, speech, and mind, which is exactly why we're all suffering. So the very first level is to begin to harness attachment by not following the body and speech. Then it begins to calm down a bit. Then you get to the next level where you can now work on the attachment itself and begin to unpack and unravel it and deconstruct it and understand it in a super sophisticated way. And you can really harness your mind and develop concentration and be a brilliant therapist in your mind, a brilliant person who understands attachment, no longer in the thrall of it. Extraordinary being, because your mind's so joyful. You don't need to jump on cakes anymore. But you could argue you could begin to touch the cake there without being berserk. Then you get to the compassion wing and you add bodhicitta, this massive, unbelievable atomic bomb of powerful state of mind that so overrides the delusions. It's like a joke, you know. So there you could happily eat a cake without the mind going berserk for the sake of someone else. It would not disturb you. In fact, you could even use anger. By this point, you're already capable. You can show anger, you know. Even as a bodhisattva, forget the tantric path yet. On the bodhisattva path, you can show anger without it being slightly to do with anger, because you're so controlled in your mind and you have so much massive attachment. It's a highly sophisticated level of realizations. So even at that level, you're able to utilize delusions, at that level even. And by the time you get to Tantra, you're so much bodhicitta, so much emptiness, so much renunciation. You have complete and utter control, and you can engage in an object of attachment. And why is because technically having the body that we've got, these great tantric yogis, and this is from the Hindus way back, they discovered the technology of the human body, you know, the way the body is constructed. We learn about that. We've got this kundalini energy, the white and red, which is the source of the bliss and the heat in the body. We've got the wind energies. We've got all the different states of mind. They understand the technology of the body so sophisticatedly and its relationship with the mind. So these greatest yogis can then have, like, brilliant, as Lama says, brilliant technology. It's highly technical. They're able to have contact with an attachment object, which triggers the bliss, and that bliss is what is used. And how that means technically is that helps your mind combined with concentration. That bliss is like an atomic bomb that gets your mind to the subtlest level. And the bottom line from here to Buddhahood is you need to access the subtlest level of your mind. You need to access the microscope of your mind. Why? Very simply, because that's the level of mind that's completely unencumbered by all the other junk. It's the microscope of your mind. And the tantric methods are the most sophisticated to get the mind to be the microscope. And at that level, you can see reality and literally become a Buddha. So it is like technical. I don't know if I've made any sense whatsoever. I think it's about time you ask me some questions now. I've said a few things here. So please ask me some questions. There's plenty more to say, obviously. I'm just trying to give a summary of the technology in a way and the relationship to attachment. Yes, Wendy.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you eat the cake and it triggers the joy, and then you use the joy because the bliss that you're using actually is what gets you to your subtler mind.
Only the way I'm talking here is very as an analogy, obviously, Wendy. So what I'm talking about is the assumption here is the greatest yogi who's got total renunciation, total bodhicitta, a realization of emptiness, single-pointed concentration. This is the analogy. So that person is utter control of their mind, and they're able, and that bliss technically combined with concentration, the ability of the human mind to experience bliss, which is a technical thing based on our construction, the yogis can utilize that intense bliss, combine it with their concentration, and that bliss is like a rocket that gets the mind to the subtlest level. That's the way to put it. So for us, all we can do is attempt to say, that's where in the bodhisattva path, instead of not having any cake, in the very first level, you just leave the cake there. The next level, you might have the cake, but before you shove it in the mouth mindlessly, you'd have a thought of bodhicitta, you'd have a thought of emptiness, and already that little bit of thought of emptiness and that little bit of thought of bodhicitta can minimize, can lessen, can mitigate the attachment. You understand what I'm saying? You become more conscious. So in that sense, you're using attachment, but at a very simple level. And you keep getting better at that as you advance spiritually. Are you seeing what I'm saying, Wendy?
Yes.
So even at the main first level, just by we have to, we eat, we sleep, we go to the toilet. Most of us won't go to the mountains. Most of us won't get renunciation. Most won't give up sex, drugs, rock and roll, mortgages, and boyfriends. So, but it's skillful means, and this is how lamas over teaches all the time on the Bodhisattva level. Forget the tantric one. Before you shove it in the mouth, before you say words, you try to have a pure motivation. And a motivation is the key factor that determines the character of the action you do. So that few moments of just thinking of bodhicitta, thinking of offering the food to others, imagining that it's empty, those few thoughts of emptiness and bodhicitta put an atomic bomb on your attachment. When you put the cake in the mouth, you still have attachment, but you've lessened it, you've mitigated it, you've sort of added in some compassion and emptiness into the mix. So your mind, that's more virtuous action than just mindlessly shoving it in and following attachment completely. So even as we progress, as we get more intelligent, as we get more practice, we can begin to lessen the attachment. And by the time you're the greatest yogis at the highest levels, they're able to totally utilize it. They aim to use it. Do you see what I'm saying, Wendy? Levels. Okay. Any other questions, people?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is, oh, sorry, I have to turn that off. So this, I completely, I enjoy Buddhism. I feel connected. I feel like the process of Buddhism appeals to me. But lately I've been running into a lot of non-duality, and there's this confusion of,
can you keep it to simple words? What do you
well,
mean?
it's just called non-dualism, just this method of,
I understand the Buddhist teaching.
I'll explain what the question.
Can you cut to the chase and ask the question?
Yes, yes.
Right.
So what I am feeling confused about is the complexity versus the simplicity, because the one
Sorry, darling.
method
Please, sweetheart, please, I beg you. Complexity of what, sweetheart? And
so
simplicity of what, darling? Can you keep the question really simple? I beg you. Complexity of what and simplicity of what?
well, the explanation was to make it simple, because that's the way I could put the word simply.
Isn't
So
that how it is? Is it not? When you've realized E equals MC squared, when you've realized some sophisticated physics concept, it's easy for you, isn't it? Would you agree with that?
yes.
Well, then that's okay. There's no contradiction. You have to do a lot of work, hard work, squeezing your brain, doing math and algebra and all the rest to get to that point. It's the same here, darling, because the delusions are so rampant.
Well,
So
because the reason is when they teach that you just simply, you know,
darling, who is this? Who you're talking about?
Just anybody who teaches non-duality.
Well, that's not true, because I'm talking non-duality here, and this is not the way I'm teaching, because it's not what I've heard.
Well, that's why I'm trying to
that's for you to find out. That's for you to look into it, darling. There's many marvelous gurus and teachers on this planet that teach many systems. We're discussing here the system of Buddhism as taught in the Vajrasattra system, as taught in Tibetan Buddhist, in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university system, which is a system that Dalai Lama teaches and that my teachers teach. I can only teach that, sweetheart.
Well, okay, so the part that I'm just trying to understand is this process of simplicity of just tuning into the spatial awareness and how that's supposed to be
that, darling. That is not
versus
sweetheart.
Versus the
I'm hearing you, darling. I'm hearing you, Petal, but that's not the teachings I'm teaching in this course here. I'm not teaching that course. I'm teaching the way my lamas have taught me. That's all I can do, darling. I'm not very knowledgeable, but I'm teaching the way the Tibetan monastic university system teaches. I mightn't be very satisfying for you. I'm very sorry, but that's all we're doing in this course here. Can you hear my words, my dear?
Yes.
Find out. It's for you to look into all these things and discover which system you like, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not the conflict I'm having. I'm just curious how because I believe they're both true, and I'm trying to understand.
I haven't done enough study yet. I'm still taking it as my working hypothesis.
Right.
I can't give you an answer to your dilemma. That's for you to find out by looking into the different systems and deciding the one you like.
Well, that's not the question I'm asking.
What's your question, darling? What is your actual question? Give me a proper down-to-earth question.
I can't do it in 5 seconds. It's one that is.
But it has to be. Otherwise, you're making it complicated. You wanted simplicity. I'm trying to make it simple. You're making it complicated, I would suggest.
Because I haven't gotten to the point where I can.
Then you haven't got a question. Then just relax and listen and just wait a little bit, perhaps. What do you think? Because in the end, it's up to you to find the teachers and the system that you like, that you find viable and reasonable. Would you agree with that? So maybe that's your question, and maybe you haven't found your system yet, and that's your job. I can't help you do that, sweetheart. That's for you to find out which system works for you. I'd suggest that's your question. You see my point? You see my point, actually, or not?
Well, my nature works with Buddhism. I've always been introspective, and a lot of the stuff that's
Okay.
taught, I do automatically. I'm just trying to understand what the sameness is.
The who? What, darling? The same.
Sameness in the
sameness.
teaching
The sameness of what, my dear?
of just focusing on spatial awareness.
That's not
And-
what I'm teaching, and that's not in this system here. That's another teaching we're talking about. Who's the Lama who taught you that? What's the source of that teaching you're describing? This spatial
Well, there's been many different teachers who I've been running into saying
Okay,
that,
good,
and I'm
okay.
just trying to
Well, there's no
see
similarity.
how that fits in the system.
I don't know, darling. You'll have to look into that yourself.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I can't help it. I'm very sorry. Please forgive me. Any other questions? Are there any? No more? No
I
more.
have a question.
Yes,
It seems to me that most in tantric practice, most people are probably, kind of faking it till they make it.
but everything's like that. Practice is like that, isn't it, Carolyn? So what's your question, darling? What's your question, sweetheart?
Well, the question is, most people are doing a very superficial level.
That's a statement. What's your that's a statement, Carolyn. What's your question, darling?
Are most people
I
doing?
know, but everything's like that. When you first learn to play tennis, aren't you faking it till you make it?
Absolutely.
Nothing
Okay.
special about that, darling. There's nothing special about that. That's normal.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions about what I've said so far? Then we can continue. Nothing? Okay. So, okay. So that's just what I just said before. We're sort of trying to get the essence of this, the idea, sort of convey the idea that it's the most sophisticated level of practice. And as Lama says, it's highly technical, and it's a method of utilizing, the tantric one especially is utilizing everything that's there. So clearly, like an alchemist, you can argue a person who can utilize poison is a person who understands it and knows it well. You can't anyone just can't utilize poison. That's why it's such a nice analogy, you know. So, okay, like I said, the entry into Tantra, you have to have the three different stages, the three prerequisites, the renunciation, which we talked about a bit, and I'm trying to convey the meaning of this. The assumption all the way through these teachings I'm giving is that we're driven by delusion. This is the key Buddhist thing. And this came from these genius Hindus before, as that woman said, these amazing, highly sophisticated thinkers before that, all the teachings about non-duality. They're the ones who found, especially the tantric yogis, they're the ones who discovered the sophisticated, they're the ones who first started shamatha. They're the ones who discovered the mind internally. They're the ones who created this technique called shamatha, which is a Hindu teaching. Then Buddha brought, when he diverged in his own direction, he used this technique. And then that's actually a Theravadan teaching. And that's what you need to accomplish to access this subtle level of mind. And that already is so sophisticated. If we compare with modern psychology, we can't believe it. It's unbelievable. The subtle levels of mind we can accomplish just getting shamatha in the sutra practices. And the point, and that level of mind, as Lama Yeshe says in his Mahamudra teaching, it is impossible to realize emptiness, which is the key method for ridding the mind of rubbish. Emptiness to realize emptiness is to cut the root delusion from the mind. So that's a sutra practice. And there's no way in the universe we can do that until we've accessed this microscope of our mind, utilizing this sutra technique called shamatha. It's so sophisticated if we compare with ordinary psychology. Now, the tantric techniques are even more subtle, even more profound, even more brilliant, even more sophisticated, that get you to the subtlest level of mind. Even the sutra practices aren't enough. This is the whole thing. So in that sense, it's like technical. You can't get out of samsara if you haven't realized emptiness. And you can't realize emptiness if you haven't got single point of concentration. And that's taught in the high school level. That's like, as I said, as a Theravadan teaching. And that already is incredible, the unbelievable subtlety of our mind. And that's what's amazing through all these teachings in Buddhism is how our mind is naturally pure. I mean, Lama talks about that in Introduction to Tantra. John Landau talks about that in his course notes. This is what's the incredible point about the Buddhist view of the mind. It's not the brain. It's in its nature clear. He doesn't talk about a soul. He doesn't talk about another third component that's permanent and uncaused and coming from a creator. None of those views are the Buddha's. He deals directly with the mind. That's his constant from the beginning to end, all the way to Tantra, is the amazingness of what mind is and its natural potential. He says that everybody possesses Buddha nature. This is a sutra teaching. That every mind logically and naturally possesses the potential to be free of delusions. And what delusions cause is suffering. When the delusions are gone, utterly and completely, the mind is completely blissful, completely radiant, completely clear, pervades the universe. Talk about simplicity. Yes, it's so simple when you're there. The mind in its nature is clear and pure. This is a starting point of all of Buddha's teachings, not to mention Tantra, that the fundamental nature of our mind is clear and pure, is capable of seeing reality as it is unencumbered by all delusions. That's Buddhahood. And these different methods at different stages of our ability to develop that. That's all. You know, this is a starting point. And this is a unique quality of Buddha, all Buddha's teachings, the purity of our mind. So what that means is, it's not that we were pure once. The Christian teachings is very interesting. I have these discussions with my Jesuit priest friend. And one of the key teachings we know in Christianity is that we're all made by God, and God is pure. We were made like God, and then we chose to be naughty. So we lost that purity. Well, the Buddha's view is that's not a possibility. If there's a unmanifest, all-knowing, all-clear, all-compassionate, all-omniscient, compassionate being, they call it God, Buddha calls it Buddha, then that Buddha can manifest another being. That being is also just a manifestation of that Buddha. It can never be impure, not possible. Because once you've removed from your mind all delusions, once you've cut the root, that's why they use the analogy of seeds and fruits. Once you've cut the root of all delusions, then delusions can't grow again. So impurity is never possible to ever grow again for eternity. So mind possesses this natural potential to be free of delusions, which is what Buddha nature means. All beings possess the potential to be enlightened, to be free of delusions and full of the virtue. That's it. That's the pure nature. That's our ultimate nature. We all possess Buddha nature, the way they say it. So it doesn't mean we've been pure once and then lost it. That's an impossibility. But our minds possess always, no matter how polluted our mind is, whether it's Hitler, Mother Teresa, or a vampire. If you're a mind possessor, totally deluded, totally outrageous, destroying the universe, delusions running rampant, still, no matter what, you are a mind possessor, and that mind, which is beginningless and endless, possesses naturally the potential to be free of delusions, which means to be pure. That's always what it means. And because Buddha's unique, amazing view is that delusions are adventitious, that he has found from his own experience that they're not at the core of our being. So all of this is the way of unpacking the concept that we all possess Buddha nature. It's not how we speak, you know. I mean, you look at a good example is an acorn. We know perfectly well if you put an acorn in the ground, give a bit of time, a bit of soil, a bit of water, you know, it'll turn into an oak tree. You look at an acorn, you look at an oak tree, you never see the similarity. In a million years, you won't see the relationship, but we learn it. So it's very simple to say, by definition, an acorn is a potential oak tree. So then by definition, all acorns possess oak tree nature. We don't talk that way, but that's an exact truth. So all beings, by definition, all mind possessors, and there are trillions, hell beings, spirits, gods, humans, animals, you name it. Every one of us possesses naturally the potential to be a Buddha. And what Buddha means is you've rid the mind of all the rubbish and you've developed the goodness to perfection, because goodness, virtue, wisdom, intelligence, kindness are in the nature of reality. They're in sync with dependent arising. So they are in the nature of our mind. They can never be removed. This is a fundamental point to understand about being Buddha, you know. Virtue cannot be removed from the mind. It's like the H2O of the mind. You know, you've got a glass of water and it's full of H2O and it's polluted. And you'd die if you drank it. But that pollution, this is a good analogy, that pollution, no matter how severe it is not in the actual intrinsic character of that water. That pollution, by definition, can be removed from the water. That's a good analogy. The water nature is always there. As long as there's that liquid, there's always H2O. But the pollution be removed. That's our mind. This is the fundamental, this is a sutra teaching. And this is what drives all of the techniques in Buddhism. This is what drives the person to practice any Tantra, is this fundamental understanding, which again, we have to study technically, not just believe in it like some cosmic idea. We have to understand it technically by studying it, because it's not how we think about the mind. I mean, there's no teaching in neuroscience that all minds are pure. It sounds like a wacky idea. Brains ain't pure, baby. They're caca. So to understand even what Buddha is a crucial point, and you learn that in the sutra teachings, you know. So Tantra is the quickest method, the most sophisticated method, that's the thing, to get the mind to the subtlest level, to get to the microscope of the mind. Because why? Very simple, because that is the level of mind that's unencumbered by all the junk, that is capable immediately of seeing reality, of realizing emptiness and removing all the delusions. So, you know, these great Tantric yogis like Geshe Lama Kontrok lived in Vajrayogini's Pure Land. He spent all his many, many years in the mountains, in the cave, naked, no food, no sleep, completely in control of his body, speech, and mind, practicing since he's 6 years old, all the sutras, all the practices, memorizing everything, all the practice in his mind. He's able to live in the caves naked, in a hole in the wall, no food, no sleep, no clothes, practicing 24 hours a day, perfecting his mind using Tantra, but based on all the other practices, you know. What time did we start? 7 o'clock. Now it's 8:20. Okay. So when we understand, it's why I'm trying to all the time convey when I teach the lamrim and teaching here too, trying to get in like the way Lama Yeshe style, down to earth way, trying to convey how it's psychologically progressive. Psychologically, you know, when we understand this energy of attachment, we're driven by it right now. You first control the servants of it, then you get to the attachments of it, unpack and unravel it, and it's you're no longer in the thrall of it. This is such a sophisticated level of psychology. That's renunciation. You're this brilliant, amazing, blissful being under control. Then you add bodhicitta. Unbelievable. Already you can utilize. Already in bodhicitta, you know, even in bodhisattva teachings, forget the tantric teachings. You can use anger. You can use jealousy. You can use the nonsense. You can use the delusions. You can use the attachment, because you're no longer in the thrall of it. You've conquered them. So you can use them for benefiting sentient beings. So this is where it's expressed beautifully in Tantra, in terms of all these Buddhas, you know. So you've got the Shakyamuni Buddha, this aspect, sutra, control body, speech, and mind. That's junior school and high school, right there. Then you've got the gorgeous deities, the gorgeous, you know, like Tara. This gorgeous, she's naked, she's in the body. Let's talk about in the Bodhisattva style. All kind of young, youthful looking, divine. And the whole point in the Tantric one is to energize us, you know, to energize us. Because you've got control over the mind. That's the idea. So the Bodhisattva style Buddha is a manifestation of the qualities of it's not just, you know, there's all these different Buddhas. There's different kinds of Buddhas. Some Buddhas are wrathful. Some Buddhas are peaceful. Some Buddhas are male. Some are female. There's highly sophisticated kind of, it's basically psychology. It doesn't look like it to us, but they're visual representations of both the qualities you want to accomplish, like love and compassion, and other manifestation of the purified delusions. So, for example, Vajrayogini, this gorgeous red naked lady, she's literally a visual manifestation of the purification of attachment. The practice of Vajrayogini, for example, is a total utilization of attachment energy. The other Buddhas, for example, Yamantaka is wrathful. If you met him in a human form, you'd be scared out of your wits. He's super wrathful, super powerful. You know, you see all these images. So it's a manifestation of anger energy. Each one, all the delusions, all the deities are different manifestations of the different purified delusions. So this is the thing for us, most of us aren't capable of actually, we're not capable of actually utilizing attachment. We're not capable of actually utilizing anger. But by doing those practices, we are purifying those aspects of our mind. You know, this is the long-term goal. And so also the other one is they talk about in Tantra how when you start developing a practice, when you get to know your own delusions, when you get to know your own mind really intimately and well, which is in the high school level. And as you keep progressing, you know your mind better. You know your main delusion, you know. You might just, so, you know, then you, and how you make, and this is interesting, how you get to know your main delusion is by knowing how you suffer in your life. So people have got lots of attachment, mainly. Always your mind's either always up and down, always dissatisfied. Maybe you wouldn't be very angry if attachment is your main delusion. You know, you might be a very quiet person, but you're always worried, you're always having anxiety, you're always having panic attacks, you're always thinking of the future, worrying about the past, worrying if something will happen, anticipating things up and down like yo-yos. Or you could be manifesting attachment as having attached to food, attached to sex. There's many ways it would manifest, you know. So if you get to know that attachment's your main delusion, then, you know, maybe Vajrayogini or Haruka Chakra will be your deity, be the one your yidam, they talk about, your yidam, the one you use in this life. If pride is your main delusion, it means you get offended easily in your life. You're so insulted by people, you get so hurt, no one appreciates you. That indicates pride is your main delusion, you know. Anger will be fairly easy. You're erupting all the time. You're kind of heavy energy. So when to learn to know your own mind in Tantra, you know that we all know we need all the qualities. We need all these. We need love. We need compassion. We need to purify jealousy, purify anger, all of them. But you get to know one that's particular, your particular practice that you would use in your life, you know. I'm not saying anything in order here. I'm very sorry. All over the place. John Landau is much more organized. So you read his course notes, you'll get a much better idea. Yes, Wendy. Yes, honey.
What is the pride deity?
Oh, there's many of them, darling.
And then there was one other question I had.
Yes.
About different bodies.
Different bodies.
Spoke about.
What, darling?
Hold on one second. You spoke about the emanation body.
That's right, exactly. Yes, that's a different. It's a form that ordinary people can see, and the joy and the enjoyment body is one only the Bodhisattva, the Arya Bodhisattvas can see. It's just different levels. The enjoyment, all the different deities in Tantra, you're seeing them all in terms of they've got subtle light bodies, and only the Arya Bodhisattvas, those who realize emptiness and in their meditation, they can see those ones. We can't see those. We just have to imagine. So the practices we do, like Tara, Vajrasattra, Chenrezig, we're visualizing the Bodhisattva aspect, looking very radiant, young, beautiful, you know, coming from the Indian sort of royal style. And they're actually light bodies. Their bodies are made of light. And all those, yeah, that's the way they talk in Tantra. Yeah.
I have one more question. I had, when I was very young, I had an initiation for white Tara.
Yes, good.
I was very confused in my 20s. And
yes,
I
well, join the club.
Vows or anything.
Sure. You took Bodhisattva vows then, actually. You took Bodhisattva vows.
I did take Bodhisattva vows when I was in my 20s. But
you would have done it when you took the initiation, darling, because the prerequisite for taking an empowerment is to have the Bodhisattva vows. And the prerequisite to take the Bodhisattva vows is having taken lay vows. So you've got all of that under your belt. But you probably didn't know.
Very confused in my 20s. So
I understand that, darling. So what's the question?
So I feel like I'm at best in high school. So what do I do with those vows?
You like those? Would you do the practice from time to time?
No, I don't even remember it.
Okay, so would you like to do the practice from time to time? No.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you email me about it, sweetheart? We'll discuss. Best. Yeah. What other people? Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, who's got a question?
Christina.
Yes, sweetheart.
Christina. Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you.
Yes.
I wrote down my question. I just wanted to ask how we use attachment, anger, and jealousy, and is that the type of thing that we would learn through the tantric practices? And
you learn it by understanding first to control the body and speech and not following those delusions. And then you learn it by understanding exactly what those delusions are when you study the mind and you begin to get renunciation. And you know technically and exactly the nature of those poisons. And every time your mind, because your mind is full of thoughts, 1 billion a second, you know, so every second when you really begin to know your mind, you can hear the thought, the conceptual story, which is labeled jealousy. You hear it and you hear it exactly, you know exactly what it's saying, you know it's rooted in anger, you know exactly it's not this and it's not that. You've got this technical level of ability to know your mind intimately. So when you know the character of jealousy, when you know the character of attachment, you can then know how to use it. You learn that in high school, then in the Bodhisattva path. That's the answer to your question, Christina.
Thank you.
Do you understand the question? Do you understand the answer?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how we learn to use those delusions. I was just wondering for tantric practices, you mentioned that we're using attachment to trigger the bliss, and then
I said that about attachment. Yeah, attachment's job is that. Attachment triggers bliss. Yeah, that's
is
right.
that part of the tantric practices that we learn to invoke the bliss?
You get bliss naturally when you get concentration.
Okay.
So you've got that in sutra as well. You get that when you get shamatha. The
So
Hinayana
as
have bliss. So they know, and the only time you can have bliss is when you've got a control, a concentrated mind. So you learn to know your mind, and you learn to get concentration, and that triggers bliss.
okay. And sorry, last question. So for junior school, we're learning concentration.
No, you're not. That's in high school, dear.
Okay, in high school we're learning.
You can learn it whenever you like, but it's a high school teaching.
Well, yeah,
It's a high
but
school
it culminates in this like single pointed concentration, and then in the compassion wing, it's like culminating in the paradigm shift of the realization of bodhicitta, and then this tantra culminates in enlightenment. Is that right? Am I understanding correctly?
Something like that, yeah. That's right.
So are there also practical practices in tantra, like the 8 verses that for compassion?
The 8 verses in sutra. Yeah, the tantric practices, the deity practices.
Okay.
We'll discuss that another day.
Okay, thank you.
This is one of the ways you practice. Another, see, what I'm trying to talk about today, and this is why it sounds weird. Maybe I'm making it sound weird. Maybe I'm confusing your minds, and I'm very sorry. Try to look at it more technically. I'm trying to do that, trying to get past. So then, but the thing is, another whole approach to the Vajrayana teachings, to the tantric, the tantric approach is, in the first stages of practice, you got your hands in your own shit. You're trying to control the shit. You're trying to control the rubbish. You're being cautious, one step at a time, keeping away from the objects that cause delusions. You're trying to control your delusions. Then you get to the Bodhisattva path, you're a bit braver. By the time you get to Tantra, so the whole point there is you're gradually moving towards becoming a Buddha by removing the weeds, and you get a nice flower garden eventually. In Tantra, the practices there of deity yoga, which are the essential techniques that are constructed in such a way that they enable you to get the mind to the subtlest level. It's all very highly integrated and technical the way they describe. But the essence of the psychology of the tantric meditations on Tara, Chenrezig, Yamantaka, Vajrayogini, whoever they might be, is that they talk about how you visualize here you're bringing it's sort of like positive thinking. One approach is to sort of calm your mind down and be a good girl and be nice. The other one is to imagine yourself being perfect, and you aim towards that. So tantric techniques, the deity yoga, they talk about them as bringing the future results into the present. So that's where you're literally faking till you're making it. You visualize yourself as Vajrayogini. You actually visualize yourself as Vajrayogini, and by practicing, working on your mind, doing the different things, you gradually, that's a method for becoming Vajrayogini. It's a very quick way to become it, by imagining you are Vajrayogini. So you're visualizing first on the outside. We do these practices all the time, and I keep them very simple. Tara's out there. We visualize all this purification. Tara goes on top of our head. Tara goes inside. So these are the way we do them simply. They're the simple version of these techniques, which are more complex, that help us transform our mind. And you combine that with emptiness and bodhicitta. Well, you combine it mostly with emptiness in the meditations. So they're quick methods. The main practice of Tantra is deity yoga. And we'll discuss all that in more detail as we go along.
Thank you.
Okay, Christina, thanks. Anybody else got any questions? Yes, Song.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teaching.
Good, a pleasure.
Can you speak more about the significance of the empowerment, please?
I think it's a really good question. I think it really makes a lot. It's very logical. We've got all these words like in transmission and, empowerment. And I always use a simple example, and I really like to use simple examples, and you'll see exactly what I mean. When I first met, I always use example. It's an example for me of a guru, and an example for me of empowerment. When I first learned to make a cake, I was 26, I was a hippie in London, and I was thinking of going home to see my mum and my family, and it was the first time I ever thought to make a cake. I'd never had a thought in my entire life. My mum knows how to make cakes since I was born, but I never bothered to cook. I never did those things. And the thought arose, I remember the day I decided I was going to make a carrot cake. Hippies must have made carrot cakes. So then I thought, well, I'm going home to Melbourne anyway. I'll ask my mum. Now, why did I choose my mum, Som? Because I'd done my market research. She was a valid cake maker. You get my point here? You check the guru. You check the students. I'd eaten my sister's cakes. Where'd they get the knowledge? From mum. I checked her peers. They said she was a good cake maker. I'd done my market research. I'd done my due diligence. You understand?
Yes.
I wasn't kind to my mum. I wouldn't have just gone and asked her for nothing. But so first point is I wanted to make a cake. I wanted the empowerment. So then I checked the teachers. I was confident she was valid. And this is what's so curious. I remember the day, in fact, it was an apple and walnut cake. I remember the day, the kitchen. So I was ready. I checked her. I said, please, mum, show me how to make a cake. She must have burst into tears. So happy, waiting 26 years. You understand? So then she showed me how to make a cake. Well, guess what that was? That was an empowerment, Som, because my mind was open. I was confident. I was devoted. I was ready. I listened, and that knowledge went into my mind. And there's a vivid picture in my mind of that day, Som. I received an empowerment from my mum, who was a cake knowledge holder. That's an exact example of what an empowerment is. You get my point?
I got it.
If I weren't open, if I was arguing, what do you mean by 4 eggs? Why not 10? I wouldn't have gotten empowerment. I would have just blocked. That's what devotion is so powerful, isn't it? I mean, you Muslims are all about Lama Yeshe said, I remember, if we had as much faith as Muslims, we'd all be Buddha by now. You understand? Being open. Devotion is a mind that's open to somebody. That's why you should choose who you be open to. Don't choose a peanut. Do you understand? You're open. I was open to my mum. I received the knowledge. And it went in. So that was an empowerment. That's a transmission. It's not a joke. We just don't call it that. That's all. So that's why it's so necessary. I mean, of course, we're talking the highest, most sophisticated level of knowledge here, another whole universe. So the most devoted student, the most devoted with the most devotion, the most open will receive the empowerment. We mostly don't even receive the empowerment. We're just intellectual for most of us. We're sick as posts. You understand? The truly devoted, realized yogis will receive the empowerment, will receive the deity right there, you know. Do you understand?
Understood. Thank you so much.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Totally. Thank you very much.
Exactly. What else, people?
Venerable Robina, Paula has a question, and then we have one question in the chat.
Good, Paula, and good who's in the chat. Good, Paula. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Oh,
Go on, talk to me.
you said that actually, because we're not very good at anything, we use the deity practices to do the transformation for us, because actually we're not capable of doing the transformation otherwise. We simply don't have what it takes. And I think you also said that the transformation is a close look to shine light, as it were, on things like anger and jealousy and so forth. Might be a very unfair question, but could you talk us through what it might feel like, what the mental and emotional process might be in transforming anger, if we were capable?
But darling, I think it's not so complicated, Paula. You know, if you've got are you a mama? Are you a mamong? Are you a mummy? No, okay. Well, you have a mummy. You had a mummy.
Yes.
Good. And you were naughty sometimes.
Oh, yes.
So let's say your mummy was let's say your mummy actually was a good mummy sometimes and wasn't overwhelmed by anger when you did some naughty thing. If she's a wise mother, you know perfectly well, Paula, that she will act angry. I've told you not to do that, Paula. You go to your room and you'll think mummy is very upset with you, but mummy was just showing anger because she needed to discipline you. We understand that. It's called tough love, baby. So the only person who can show tough love, if your mother was completely overwhelmed by attachment to you and full of neurotic, and her little Paula, and no matter what Paula did, she'd get mad at her when she was angry herself, but she'd let you get away with murder when she wasn't angry. That's a weak mother. She was a hopeless mother. She was falling all over the place. But if she's a wise mother, she will know what's best for Paula all the time, and she will show tough love. That's utilizing anger, baby. Nothing special. Just that the yogis, the Buddhas can kill you. That's all. The greatest yogi, the greatest Buddha would actually be able to kill you if it was beneficial for you, because they could see your 47 future lives and then that was best for you. That's another whole level. The wrathful deities, if you met one in human form, they'd scare the life out of you. That's just an extreme example of the most advanced level of using anger. You get my point here? Are we talking? Sorry, you understand my point?
I do. So if my mum can do it, we can do it.
We've got to start somewhere. That's what I'm trying to say. It's all a question of degree. It's all a question of level. We start somewhere. Even on the Bodhisattva path, we can, even before you shove the cake in mindlessly and give in to the attachment, you can stop, think of it, think of eating, doing for the sake of others, think it has no intrinsic nature. You just put atomic bombs under attachment. We can all do that. It's a question of degree and capability. It's not some absolute thing, you know. So the greatest yogis who've got realization of emptiness, bodhicitta, and renunciation can do the most profound actions effortlessly and without any effort because they're so advanced. You understand?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. What else, people?
Okay, this is a question from Anna. Does it matter which lineage you receive empowerments from? And is it preferable to have repeated empowerments? Thank you.
Anna, darling, it's up to who your connections are with. Like, you know, it's up to what lamas you have, what tradition you're part of, or who your teachers are. That's why you've got to check very carefully. As we know in Tibet, there are many traditions. We've all got different karmic connections, you know. So if you've got your teachers, then you be very clear. You don't just shop around like an idiot. You really stick to your own teachers, and you check that they're valid. Like I just had to check even my mum to see if she's a valid cake maker. So we must have checking that the gurus are valid. They've got a proper system. You're in part of a proper system. You've got to be very clear. And then, of course, the more you take empowerments, the more marvelous it is. But not just shopping around. You do it to enhance your qualities and to help you receive. It's very powerful to do initiations every time. Absolutely. And you must do it eventually when you get practices. Once you've done certain things, you've got certain practices, you would do it. You call it a self-initiation. You go through those different stages because psychologically, they're all very precise in what they're trying to accomplish and the seeds you're trying to put in your mind. It's very marvelous. Absolutely. The more, the better. All right. Good, darling. What else, people? What else? Any other questions? Yes, Doris. Yes, sweetheart.
What do you mean by self-initiation so that I understand that?
Just that's all. By the very word, it means that you give yourself initiation. When you've got the practice, you've done the retreat, you've done certain things, you've had it, then there's a certain practice they call self-initiation, which will become part of your practice. You do it yourself.
Thank you.
What else, people? No questions. All right. So maybe I don't know. Maybe I should look at John Landau's notes and try and stick to the script. I go all over the place. Okay. Any questions at all? Have I confused you? I need to know. Please, I need to know. Have I confused you? Have I made you more puzzled? Are you worried? Have I kind of freaked you out? No. I'm glad. At least some people are saying no anyway. Maybe I upset somebody, maybe a kind person whose second name is Vizar, who asks those questions. I can't make you happy, sweetheart. Steve, what about you? Gary and Nancy, David, John, Mark, all you people, Colleen, Aida, haven't made you worried. There's Heather. What about Heather? You're okay, Heather? No questions? Okay. So maybe I just think we'll do that in each session. Let's just do a little meditation, okay? I mean, the way I've done these, if you've been with me before, you've seen we've done Chenrezig and Tara. They're just interchangeable. The principles are the same, you know? And then there's Vajrasattra, which is a very specific one. So maybe we'll do Vajrasattva. See, Vajrasattva is because Vajrayana is so integrated into the Tibetan Buddhist system, when you even start a practice, you will do Vajrasattva. But that's from Tantra. So, okay, to get very clear, every time you see a Buddha looking with cute clothing on and looking like, with earrings and things, that's Tantra. Every time you see Shakyamuni, that's Sutra. So Chenrezig is Tantra. Tara is Tantra. Vajrasattva is Tantra. They're all the different Buddhas in the Vajrayana, the different manifestations of different qualities, you know. And because, as I said, it's so integrated into the Tibetan Buddhist system that even when you're little children, you know, you learn these practices. There are many you can do without empowerment. There's some you wouldn't do until you'd received empowerment. So Vajrasattva is one that, you know, there are 4 levels of Tantra, and this is one, I think, of the first or the second. So you can do these without and empowerment, like Tara, like Chenrezig, you know. So I think, why don't we do Vajrasattra practice to finish? 15 minutes of Vajrasattra as to purify our obstacles, purify our delusions, to purify our obstacles to our realizations. We'll think like that. So just do it very easily, very easygoing. I'll do it quite specifically. So and we'll describe the Buddhas in more detail another session. We'll go there. So here Vajrasattra, as I said, if you have this sort of family tree, like I said, you've got Dharmakaya, which is the mind of the Buddha. Then you've got the two types of bodies, and you've got Sutra, you've got Shakyamuni, and in Tantra, you've got Vajradhara. So alongside Vajradhara, who's blue, Bodhisattva style, holding Dordian bell, single or with a consort, and I'll describe all that later. Then another version of him is called Vajrasattra, and he's white, and he's particularly related to emptiness, I think. And because the point is, you see, you don't purify delusions finally until you realize emptiness. So this Vajrasattra practice, in combination with the four opponent powers, which is a sutra teaching, the four opponent powers is sutra, but we combine it with Vajrasattra. And the other thing is too, and I'll just say that briefly here, but we'll go into this more. For all, any practice in which you use a Buddha, any practice where you visualize a Buddha, any practice where you even say the word Buddha, it kind of makes the practice 1 billion times more strong. We've got to think about that. It might just sound superstitious, but we'll try and talk about that. Try and make it logical. So, okay, just visualizing. No, don't visualize yet. We'll just start the practice. Be very easygoing, very relaxed. So the first is the 4 R's, the 4 opponent powers. So the first one, regret. The Lamas teach in different order, but I like this order. The first step is you acknowledge. So here, let's just think in particular, we're going to regret all the dumb things we've done since beginningless time, just in general, this life and past lives, because you see, nothing we ever do goes astray. Remember, every tiny thing we ever think and do and say since beginningless time is programmed in our minds. It's just the way it is, So there's trillions of karmic seeds. So in terms of so one way of seeing all these karmic seeds is they are the obstacles to our getting realizations. Why we're not Buddha this second is because these weeds are in the way, choking our virtue, choking our wisdom. So we're going to put atomic bombs under those. So first we think of all the karmic imprints that are left in our mind from this life, from doing dumb things, hurting others, with our body and speech, but also spiritually breaking our commitments, breaking our word of honor with our teachers this life, but also past lives. If we're doing Buddhism now, we've done it before. We've met the teachings before, we've met the lamas before. So we've got karmic obstacles in there from not keeping our commitments, not keeping our pure samaya, which means our word of honor, in the past lives. This is why we can't understand the teachings now. This is why we have obstacles. So we imagine that we first regret. We first think, whatever I've done in the past, all my countless lies when I was a Buddhist in the past. I mean, the Buddha says we've had single-pointed concentration in countless lifetimes. We've lost it. We didn't use it to go all the way. We lost the plot. So we think of all the karmic seeds from the actions we've done to harm others, to not keep our practice purely, to have misconceptions, to make a mess of our minds, that are why we've got blocks now. We regret these from the depths of our heart, especially our relationship with our teachers, relationship with the guru, relationship with our Vajra brothers and sisters, breaking our vows in past lives. We'll discuss all this later. Vows, the power of vows. We regret because we want to get realizations. We want to realize emptiness. We want to realize guru devotion. We want to realize all these teachings. We want to see the simplicity because there is simplicity. I understand the point that woman said before. It's complicated to us now because our minds aren't simple. We make it complicated. So we imagine all we regret from the depths of our heart, all this nonsense from the past that are causing us now to be blocked. So we want all that to be gone. We regret from the depths of our heart because we're sick of suffering. We want to get realizations. We want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. So we deeply regret whatever we've done to block this, all the dumb actions in the past. We really want that. Really think that. It's like regret is kindness to yourself. I promise you, it's not guilt. Guilt is garbage. It's real sincere because of our own ignorance in the past. We didn't know, now we really regret all these foolish things we've done in the past that are blocking us from realizations now, blocking us from being this marvelous person we can become. So whom can we turn to? The second step, reliance. So we visualize above our head the Buddha. And now we have a spiritual teacher. We'll discuss this a lot. Guru devotion, as they call it, is a huge, crucial, central practice in Tantra. So we'll discuss this in more detail, but trying to always see the logic of it. Don't be superstitious. We'll see the logic of it. We'll discuss it later, other days. So here, if we have a spiritual teacher, the word guru, heavy with qualities, is a wonderful word. That's what a teacher is. It's this person in human form whom you can see now, whom you have decided is the Buddha for you. We have to practice cultivating that view, As Papankara says, you choose your guru very carefully, please, because you're going to end up like them. So imagine Vajrasattra above your crown, and it's your Lama, your spiritual teacher's mind manifesting in this form. They're like in a play, they're dressing up as this Buddha for you. The Buddha and your Lama are the same. There can't be a difference. So Vajrasattra is in the Bodhisattva style, Bodhisattva aspect, looking gorgeous, white body, male, full lotus position, sitting on a multicolored lotus on the sun disk and moon disk, like two flat cushions, you can't see them, representing wisdom and compassion. And then, hang on a minute. And then you visualize he's got this bodhisattva style with his silken kind of clothes, like in the royal style, full lotus. And his left hand is holding a bell crossed at his heart, which represents wisdom. And his right hand is holding a vajra crossing over the left hand, and that's crossed over, and that's representing compassion, the wisdom, which is also in Tantra referred to as bliss. The two wings of the bird are wisdom and bliss in Tantra, the method. There's compassion, but also bliss, combining wisdom and bliss. That's how they talk. So that's at his heart. And he's got this blissful face, radiant, loving, compassionate, kind. Bodhisattva style with his 5-pointed crown, hair down his back. Everything's made of light, beautiful, radiant, make your mind so happy. And he's sitting above your crown, the same way as you. And he's Vajradhara, but he's white. He's Shakyamuni Buddha in Tantric aspect. The biggest Buddha deer. So now we delight. I mean, refuge, we take a refuge. You can say a formal prayer, but I'd rather think, I'm so happy I found a doctor. That's what we've got to choose and check up. So I was saying before to the woman, we've got to work out what our path is. We've got to work out which our system is. We've got to work out who our lamas are. So here, if we've committed to ourselves to being a Buddhist, then we're delighted we found a doctor. We found the Buddha. We found the doctor, the Lama, the doctor, the Buddha, who's got the methods that I can use to transform myself, to become like them. So we just delight in that. That's refuge. Then the second part, reliance, is now we think of compassion. All those we've harmed over the centuries, all the obstacles that we've created in our own mind by harming sentient beings with our attachment, our aversion, our jealousy, our nonsense, as animals, as humans, as who knows what. Just having enormous compassion for all the beings we've harmed and all the beings who've harmed us. Enormous compassion for all of them. I must purify as well for their sake, because compassion is the motor that drives the bodhisattvas to become Buddha. That's the juice. That's the energy. Enormous compassion. I must purify for their sake, everybody else's. Regrets for your own sake. So now the third step, the remedy. So we now visualize Lama Chenrezig Lama Vajrasattra, so compassionately. He sends from his heart, imagine his heart chakra, he arcs around this powerful hose of nectar, hose of liquid energy, very powerful, like those hoses, like those wind hoses, or those ones they do in the gutter where all the stuff goes down the drain, Very powerful hose of white nectar that arcs around from his heart, enters your crown and forcefully fills you, washing out, no choice, forcing out through to leave through the lower parts of your body, all the imprints of all the actions we've ever done since beginning this time to harm sentient beings, to break our vows, etc., with our bodies. Disappears into space, not one atom left. This blissful, this nectar filling us, forcing out like filthy liquid, disappearing into space, not one atom left. Imagine as we recite the mantra. Om Vajrasattra Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattra Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Anorato me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasatva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasatva Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Norato me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasatva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasatva Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Anorato me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Imagine now completely full of this nectar. How amazing. Every atom, all the negativity created by our bodies, our ridiculous bodies over countless lifetimes. Disappeared, gone into nothing. How amazing. Full of this nectar. And now Lama Vajrasattva so compassionately sends this time the nectar again from his heart, arcs around, enters our crown, fills us, but forcing up to the top of our body all the junk from all the imprints we've ever from the actions we've ever done, which is as clever humans, with our speech to harm sentient beings, breaking our vows. I mean, this is the thing, breaking our vows is with speech as much as bodies all throughout our past lives. That are the blocks to why we don't have realizations now, why we can't find our lamas, why we can't practice properly, why we're lazy, why we don't do our practice properly, why we don't have enthusiasm. It's because we've created these obstacles for ourselves, and we have such compassion for ourselves because we're sick of this suffering. So we imagine all purified, all these ridiculous obstacles, all the actions of our speech, the rubbish of our speech, since beginning of this time. And it all, like Lama Yeshe says, like a glass in the sink. When you turn on a tap in the sink, all the junk in the glass comes to the surface, doesn't it? And leaves through the top. All this leaves like filthy liquid, disappears through the top part of our body into space. Not one atom left. Full of this powerful nectar pushing upwards. Om Vajrasatva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasatva Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Anorakta me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasatva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasatva Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Anorakta me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasatva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasatva Tenopatita Dido me bawa Sutoshayo me bawa Suposhayo me bawa Anorakta me bawa Sarvasidi me prayatsa Sawakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. That pe is like very wrathful. Spit it out. So now imagine full of this blissful nectar. How amazing. Purified all the speech. How marvelous. Now, the mind, the main problem, all the delusions. This time light comes. I don't know if light can arc around, but we have to pretend it does. Light beams from the heart of the guru. Entering our crown and instantly fills us, like instant. Like Lama Yeshe says, the minute you turn on a light in the room, instantly the darkness is dispelled. That's how delusions go, like that, boom. When you realize emptiness, it's like that second. Once you realize the obstacles, the obstacles, once you realize the object of negation, once you've known what it is, that second, the realization it doesn't exist, and all the obstacles. So we realize here, we realize emptiness, we realize liberation. How amazing! All the delusions gone. How incredible! Full of bliss. Can you imagine? Om Vajrasattra Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattra Teno Patita Dito Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Norakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Sitam Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarvatata Gada Vajramami Musa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dito Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Norakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatata Gada Vajramami Musa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dito Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Anorakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvachara Gada Vajramami Mutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe. Full of this blissful light, liberation. How amazing. But now there's more we can do, even to remove the subtlest imprints, which is called the obstacles of omniscience, which is what you get once you've combined this wisdom with bodhicitta. Now you remove even the subtlest imprints and you become a Buddha. Think of it like a second rinse. Even the subtlest imprints left, gone, gone. So here it sounds very busy, you know. You do the three together. Do your best. Light, nectar going down, nectar coming up, and light. Do the lot. Om Vajrasattra Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattra Teno Patita Dita Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Anorakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatara Gada Vajramami Musa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattra Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattra Teno Patita Dita Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Anorakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatara Gada Vajramami Mutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dita Mebawa Sutrashaya Mebawa Supashaya Mebawa Anorakta Mebawa Sarvasiri Mebrayasa Sawakama Susame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarvatara Gada Vajramami Mutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe. Totally become Buddha. How amazing. Imagine this. Totally purified. So now the fourth step, the most important, Babonka Rinpoche says, the resolve, the determination to change. So we make decisions, you know, we've got vows. You know, if we've taken vows and we've got vows and we break them, we weaken them a bit, we make a decision, we're going to do the best we can to keep our word of honor, keep our samaya, keep our vows, and then also to not kill and not steal and not harm and not lie. But don't lie to yourself. You be specific, you know, so maybe you make a couple of decisions to yourself for what you can and can't accomplish. You know, decide, resolve. Well, just think, I'm going to do my best to know my vows, to know my commitments, to take. And so, of course, if you don't know them, how can you keep them? You know, many of us have taken tantric vows, taken bodhisattva vows, taken lay vows, probably haven't got a clue what we've taken. Well, how do you know if you've broken them? If you don't know the road rules, how do you know you've broken the road rules? You don't. So to study these, all these are the details, you know. And basically vows, you know, vows are like how to do something, that's all. Or how to do something well, that's all. So when we learn these vows that help us turn ourselves into a Buddha. How amazing. So this aspiration to not want to break them, to want to keep them, to want to know them, so we can become a Buddha, so we can practice all these marvelous techniques and become the Buddha, just like all the holy beings. And then we imagine the lotus dissolves into Vajrasattva and he dissolves into light and blissfully merges with the energy of the body, speech, and mind of Vajrasattva, the energy of the body, speech, and mind of our Lama, and our own body, speech, and mind merge. Union, oneness, as Lama Yeshe says. So just imagine this. Oneness, same thing. Just for a minute, just bliss out. Imagine yourself as vast as the universe. No thoughts. All right, that's it. Done. So thank you, people. We hope, I hope, the words I say are useful. We'll try and cover all the points. But John Landau's course notes are very clear, so study those, even though it's a letter size PDF, and you probably read it on your phone, so it's very difficult. I was thinking, Mary, to try and do it as a nice A5 and a phone size one. It makes it more readable. I might even do that this week. We'll see how we go. But then I please also recommend that you all please study Lama Yeshe's Introduction to Tantra. It gives you the overview. It really gives you the overview. It's so perfect. And it's edited by John. So it's a beautiful book, and you'll really understand as a basis for the stupid words I'll be saying these next few weeks. Okay. Hopefully I don't mislead all you people. Good night in England. Go to bed. It's 4 a.m. Come on, you have to cook your children's breakfast soon. Susie and Jamie stayed up all night. Oh my God. Okay, you people. Thank you, lots of love. Jangchup Semtok Rinpoche, Ma Kepanam Keguching. Kepa Nyampa Mepa Yango Negondu Pelbo Shog. That's Bodhichitta may grow and grow in the hearts of all. And may the realization of emptiness grow and grow in the hearts of all. And if we do have spiritual teachers, may we never develop, even for a moment, wrong views towards these of our most precious teachers. With faith and respect gained from seeing their goodness, may their full inspiration flow into our hearts. It's the quickest one. We'll go zooming in. If your heart's open, the realizations will come zooming in, I promise. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Goodbye and good night. Whatever the Ronnie said. What did the Ronnie say?
Good night.
What was the